Late on the night of October 13th, 2008, a 43-year-old woman named Hua Saihui sat in her parked car in a dark, desolate area off the side of Highway 61 in New Taipei City, Taiwan. Hua rolled down her driver's side window and then turned the engine off. And for a second, she just sat there and let the warm breeze blow in on her face. It wasn't often that she got a moment alone because she had 3 kids who all lived at home. So she just took a moment to enjoy the silence. And then eventually, she turned to the center console and she grabbed a piece of paper that was sitting there. And she tore the paper into tiny pieces and then tossed them out the open window. But when she did that, she didn't realize that the breeze kind of blew back in at the same time, and a few of those ripped up pieces actually found their way back inside of her car and settled in the pocket on the driver's side door. A little while later, around 3 a.m., a Coast Guard officer drove along Highway 61 doing his regular nighttime patrol. He went under an overpass and into an area where there weren't very many streetlights. And there, in the relative darkness, he saw something that was pretty odd. There was this gray sedan parked half on and half off the road. Intrigued, the Coast Guard officer pulled up behind the car, parked, and got out to investigate. The sedan's lights and engine were both off, and so the officer wondered if maybe this car had been abandoned. But as he got closer, he saw that the driver's side window was wide open. Now again, it was pretty dark, but the officer could make out the shape of what appeared to be a woman sitting inside the car in the driver's seat. And so the Coast Guard officer took out his flashlight to wake this person up, but when he shined the light into the car, he immediately reeled back in horror, because the woman was not asleep. Her entire head and her chest were covered in blood. A few minutes later, a police officer named Guo Huiwen arrived on the scene along with a small team of other police officers and several EMTs. The EMTs quickly determined what basically everybody on scene already knew, which was the woman inside the car was dead. She had a small circular wound right below her left ear that authorities immediately recognized as a bullet wound. Officer Guo immediately pushed his men out to secure the scene. And then once the cordon was in place, they began investigating. The first thing Guo did was just to look more closely at the woman's body. He saw there was a bullet casing on the ground nearby, and also what appeared to be some bullet fragments in the car, like little bits of shiny metal, like copper. But there was no gun. And so at this point, Officer Guo and his team realized they were very likely dealing with a murder. But as he stood there sort of taking it all in and looking at the car and the body, he started to realize that the whole scene just seemed off. First, there were no skid marks behind the car's tires, so it appeared like the woman must have pulled over in a controlled way, not like she'd been, forced off the road by another car. Second, her window was all the way down. The driver's side window was completely down, which meant either she'd been driving with the window down to begin with, or after she had pulled over, or while pulling over, she had rolled it down. And then thirdly, there was no evidence of a struggle, or really any sign that this woman had been panicked in any way before she was ultimately shot. I mean, she hadn't even dropped her phone or taken off her seatbelt. And so overall, it just sort of seemed like this woman had been remarkably calm in her final moments, like she had no idea she was about to be killed. And this made Officer Guo think that whoever shot her was very likely somebody she knew and trusted. And so Guo knew he needed to identify this woman and then determine who was close to her. So he took down the license plate number of the car, and he was about to go run it through a system to see who the car belonged to, but suddenly another officer came running over, and they told him they'd found something really weird inside the car. They weren't sure if what they found was related to the crime, but in the pocket on the driver's side of the door, they'd found 4 small scraps of paper, and each scrap had what looked like numbers or word fragments handwritten on them. They said 65, Dao Leo, Z, and Da. Now, none of these fragments appeared to have any meaning on their own. They likely, needed to be a part of a bigger piece of paper to make sense. In fact, honestly, the words were just pieces of words rather than actual full words themselves. And also, when they began sort of arranging the 4 pieces to see if they could, find meaning in these words and this number, they couldn't do it. It just was all sort of nonsense. And so Officer Guo, he figured these scraps were likely just garbage, But as a precaution, he had his officers bag them up as evidence just in case. Let's take a moment to say thank you to our sponsor, Sherwin-Williams. Choosing a paint color can be easy when you have the right tools. Sherwin-Williams offers several solutions for finding the perfect hue, including color chips, peel and stick samples, and color-to-go samples, so you can try color before you buy and find your perfect color with confidence. Your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store delivers color and project expertise, a product for every need, and personalized customer experience. So my wife and I have been renovating our basement to make it our primary hangout space for the family. And in the basement is a custom entertainment center that we had installed, and it was supposed to get painted by professional painters, until my wife said, well, hey, why don't we make this our big project over spring break to paint it ourselves? Now, of course, I was thrilled, as any good husband would be, and so what we did is we went to our local Sherwin-Williams store, and let me tell you, the entire experience really was awesome. The staff was very knowledgeable, and they helped us pick the right paint color and finish, the amount of paint, all the supplies we would need, and they even gave us some how-to painting tips. And so my wife and I get home from Sherwin-Williams, and we start our one-day project that quickly evolved into a multi-day project. But at the end of those days, it came out great, and we could not have done it without the help of Sherwin-Williams. And now the entertainment center in the basement is the focus piece of the room, and I can proudly say we did that thanks to Sherwin-Williams. Head to swsamples.com to order color samples for your next project. Everyday life is full of moments that you plan for, and also moments that just happen, often when you least expect them. Whether it's part of your normal routine or something unexpected, Amazon is where you go for everyday essentials, making shopping simple and dependable. From running out of household basics to last-minute surprises, Amazon's great deals and low prices on everyday essentials make it easier to handle whatever life throws your way. Everything is in one place, so there's no extra stress or jumping through hoops when time is already tight. Whether it's something you buy regularly or something you suddenly realize you need right now, Amazon makes it easy to find what you're looking for quickly and at a price that feels good. It's straightforward, dependable shopping that makes everyday moments feel more manageable with less stress, fewer steps, and more confidence that your money is well spent. Shop Amazon and save on essentials. Save the everyday. A few hours later, Officer Guo, along with a member of his team, walked into this huge apartment complex in New Taipei City that was about 40 miles away from where they had found the woman inside of the gray sedan earlier that morning. They went to a specific apartment and they knocked on the door. And after a moment, a middle-aged man opened the door up, and he looked very surprised to see police standing at his door. Officer Guo asked this man if his name was Xu Bicheng, and the man nodded and said yes. By this point, Officer Guo and his partner had identified the murder victim. She was 43-year-old Hua Saihui. And when they'd started looking into Hua's relationships, they'd learned that she lived in this apartment with her 3 kids and the man who had opened the door, Xu Bicheng. He was her ex-husband. Even though the couple had actually gotten divorced 5 years earlier, they had ultimately decided to continue living together and co-parenting. As Hua's ex-husband, Xu was an obvious person of interest in this murder. But at this point, Officer Guo wasn't sure how much Xu even knew. So he had to be careful how he approached the conversation. Officer Guo started by introducing himself and his partner, and then asked Xu if he had spoken to his ex-wife recently. And Xu shook his head and said he actually hadn't spoken to her since the previous night. But he did say that their last conversation had definitely been kind of weird. He said that the previous night, around 8:45 p.m., Hua had left to go to this meeting with a pawn shop owner on the opposite side of the city. He said that she owed this pawn shop owner a lot of money, and they were supposed to be discussing a repayment plan. But around 9:30 p.m., while she was on her way to this meeting, Xu said that Hua had actually called him to say she was out on Highway 61 and another car was now following her. Xu had told her that very likely this was just somebody driving a similar route as her, like this was not a cause for concern. And so ultimately, Hua had sort of agreed and said okay and hung up. And according to Xu, he tried calling Hua back a bit later, but she hadn't picked up. Xu said he actually called Hua an additional 10 more times after this, but She never answered, and so Xiu said he really didn't know what became of his ex-wife. He didn't know how the meeting went, he didn't know where she was. Now, after hearing this, Officer Gua's first reaction was sort of to be like, that's absurd. If Xiu knew that Hua was potentially being followed, at night no less, while she's out by herself, going to this relatively high-stakes meeting with this pawn shop owner, and then she suddenly stops answering her phone, why wouldn't Xiu have eventually called the police? Or at least tried to go look for her? Instead, he'd just called Hua a bunch of times, and then when she didn't answer, he just shrugged the whole thing off. The mother of his kids, he just sort of said, oh, no big deal. It just felt like a really bizarre way for somebody to react to this situation. So, Officer Gua watched Xiu very carefully as he told him, what happened. He said he was very sorry, but early that morning, they'd found his ex-wife murdered inside of her car on the side of the highway. When Xiu heard this, his eyes went wide and he began to tremble. And, from Gua's perspective, it looked like sort of a shocked response, a genuine shocked response that he can't believe what he's being told. But he also really couldn't read the guy. He couldn't tell if this was genuine or if he was just performing. Either way, Gua knew what he needed to do next was follow up on Xiu's story and see if maybe he could poke some holes in it. Following this interview, Gua and his team asked the manager of the apartment complex for any available surveillance footage so they could see if Hua really did leave the apartment when Xiu said she did. And the manager was able to recover some footage from inside the apartment complex elevator. And while it did prove that Hua left around 8:45 p.m., like Xiu had said, it also showed something else that struck Officer Gua as kind of strange. In the video, Hua rode down the elevator, supposedly on her way to meet with this pawn shop owner, but for some reason, her ex-husband, Xiu, rode the elevator with her. And during this ride, Xiu kissed Hua for 8 seconds straight and then hugged her until the elevator stopped and the doors opened. Now, to most people, this would just look like a sort of normal, tender moment between a loving couple. But it was odd in this case, really for 2 reasons. First, because Hua and Xiu were divorced. As far as Gua understood, they were definitely not a romantic couple at all anymore. And then secondly, it was also weird because in Taiwanese culture, public displays of affection are very taboo, especially among older generations. Like, it would be really uncommon for a middle-aged couple to kiss and hug pretty much anywhere except inside their own home. So, Officer Gua felt like, the only reason that made sense for Xiu to behave the way he had on the elevator was if he knew something bad was about to happen to his ex-wife. And as they continued investigating Xiu's story, they found more problems with it. They learned that the pawn shop owner did exist, and Hua did owe him a lot of money, but when they actually spoke to him, he said he had not been planning to meet with Hua on the night of her death. He didn't know what she was talking about. Police also got access to surveillance footage from Highway 61, where Hua's body had been found. Now, the cameras didn't cover the part of the road where the murder actually took place, but police were able to get footage of Hua driving along the highway at 9:30 p.m., the time Xiu said she had told him she was being followed. But on this video, there was clearly no other car following Hua. Now, it was technically possible that Hua had lied to her ex-husband Xiu for some reason, but to Officer Gua, it seemed much more likely that Xiu was now lying to him and making up, this story about the car following his ex-wife. After learning all of this, Officer Gua and his team went back and looked at all the surveillance footage from the apartment complex, and they also got access to Xiu's cell phone GPS records to see if they could track his movements on the night of the murder. But what they found really only complicated things, because according to the footage and Xiu's cell phone pings, he was inside of his apartment all night. There was no way he was the one who shot Hua. But to Officer Gua, this didn't mean Xiu was innocent. He wondered if maybe Xiu had hired someone to commit the murder on his behalf. He didn't know, but he just felt like Xiu had to be involved. But that theory still left a lot of unanswered questions. Like, why would Xiu have wanted Hua dead in the first place? And why would Hua have calmly pulled over and opened her car window for a hitman potentially? And so Officer Gua thought about it for a little bit, and then he had an idea. Maybe the person Xiu hired wasn't a stranger. Maybe the hitman was somebody Hua knew and trusted. Several months later, Officer Gua and one of his teammates were sitting inside of an office in a high-rise building in New Taipei City. They were in front of this huge desk, and behind this desk was the man who worked in this office. And he was Hua's brother. So Officer Gua and his team were still working off the idea that whoever killed Hua likely knew her personally. So they'd spent the last few months methodically tracking down and interviewing everyone in her cell phone contacts list. Now, so far, they had not found any new suspects. But they had learned some pretty interesting stuff. Apparently, Hua had not just been in debt to that pawn shop owner. She also owed money to multiple banks, to friends, to family members. She even owed money to some very shady black market lenders. Altogether, she had the equivalent of nearly $500,000 in debt. And knowing all of this actually made Hua and her ex-husband Xiu's relationship make more sense. Several people had told Gua that the reason Hua and Xiu had gotten divorced was not because they wanted to. It was because Hua's credit was terrible because of all this debt, and Xiu wanted to keep his finances separate from hers. And so by all accounts, the couple, despite being divorced, were still very much in love, and they were both devoted to each other and to their kids. And so this new information had kind of left Officer Gua and his team floundering, because Xiu had initially seemed so suspicious, but Gua still didn't have any hard evidence against him, and now he didn't even seem to have a motive for him. So now, as Gua sat inside of this office across from Hua's brother, he just hoped that some new piece of information would come to light. Gua and his partner asked the brother to please tell them everything he knew about Hua, her marriage, and anything else he thought might be relevant. The brother nodded and started talking. But pretty quickly, what he was saying just sounded a lot like all the other stuff that Gua already knew. Like, this was not new information, it was the same as always. And so as the brother just kind of began to talk, Gua's eyes sort of left the brother and began wandering around the room. And eventually, Gua's gaze landed on a bookshelf behind the brother, behind the desk. He noticed there was a piece of paper sticking out from between two books on this shelf. Now, Gua could only see a little bit of it, but he could tell that there was handwriting on the paper that looked familiar. And so, without saying anything, like while the brother is still talking, Gua got up, walked around to the bookshelf, and he pulled out that piece of paper. And right away, as he's looking at it, his heart began to race, because he saw that the handwriting on this piece of paper was the same handwriting that were on those 4 little scraps of paper that were found at the crime scene, those pieces of paper that were sort of ruled out as trash. He's seeing this is definitely the same handwriting. But more than that, Gua is seeing that literally the actual words or portions of words and the number that were on those fragments are literally on this piece of paper. Clearly, he's looking at a duplicate of whatever document was in the car that got ripped up. He only had 4 little pieces before. Now he's looking at the full copy of that document. And as Gua looked over this document, it was like everything just snapped into place. Those fragments that he saw, those things that were found in the car that now have been laid out in this document, those were bits and pieces of street names and addresses. The full message that Gua was now looking at was actually a set of geographical directions. And the directions would lead whoever was following these directions to the actual location where Hua was murdered. And so after this discovery, the police very quickly figured out what happened to Hua, like who the mastermind was behind her murder. But amazingly, the mastermind was not Hua's brother, despite this document being found in his office. No, it would turn out that the story of Hua's murder was far darker and far more tragic than anybody could have imagined. It all began 1 month before Hua's death. That was when 3 people who all wanted Hua dead met up. That was Hua's brother, Hua's ex-husband, and the mastermind. And the three of them, once they got together, they began formulating a plan. Now, what they all decided was none of them wanted to get their hands dirty, so they would hire a hitman. They decided that once they had this hitman, they would kill Hua in a neutral location. They would shoot her on the side of the highway. And they chose a date for her execution that was convenient, a time when that section of the road would be basically empty and also was an area where there were no cameras and few streetlights. And so on the night that Hua is going to be executed, the reason Hua's ex-husband, Xiu, rode down the apartment elevator with her and hugged her and kissed her in this big display of affection was because he knew what was going to happen to her. He was basically saying goodbye. And then after Hua left the apartment, Xiu contacted Hua's brother, who then called the hitman. And then the hitman used the directions the brother had written out for him, those same directions that Hua had found in his office. The hitman used those to get to the location where they were going to kill Hua. And when he got there, he just pulled off to the side of the road and he waited. A little while later, the hitman saw Hua's gray sedan pass by him and come to a stop on the side of the road. And so at this point, the hitman got out of his car, he walked up alongside Hua's car, her window was down, he pulled out a gun, and he shot her. It would turn out the third person who met up with the ex-husband and the brother who wanted Hua dead, who was the mastermind behind Hua's execution, was Hua herself. The reason Hua had those directions in her car that she ultimately ripped up at the end and tried to dispose of is because she needed directions to go to the place where she was going to get killed. It's why the hitman got out of the car, walked right up and killed her with no fight. She had rolled down the window and was waiting. Police later determined that Hua had taken out a life insurance policy on herself that was worth so much money it would pay off all of her debt and leave her family with a lot of money left over. She'd planned her own murder as a sort of self-sacrifice in the hopes of giving her family a better life. She'd ultimately convinced her ex-husband and brother to help in exchange for a cut of the money. But her plan didn't really work out. Hua's death was ruled a suicide, not a homicide, so the life insurance company didn't pay out anything to her family. Xiu, Hua's brother, and the hitman all faced a number of charges, including facilitating suicide and fraud. They each received between 6.5 and 7 years in prison.